All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode, the final exciting episode of Daily December 2022, day the 31. Uh, we made it a gig again. This is, like I said, this is my 10th year doing this. However, this is only my second year actually getting a video out on that day. I've done 31 videos every December for the past 10 years, but it wasn't until last year that I actually got out every video on the day it was supposed to be out. So this is still a relatively new thing for me. If any of you have never seen my Daily Decembers before, I do in the month of January sometime. I do a kind of what I learned thing, and if I am starting any new projects based on the things that happened during the Daily December, that's generally when I announce them. However, so normally I prefer not to talk about quote unquote what I learned in the month of December, because I like to give myself a little bit of time to recover from it, and so that I can really kind of internalize everything that happened. So I am still planning on doing a what I learned of a video sometime probably in the first week of January. However, I learned two different things this year. Yes, Daily December always helps me kind of learn new things, and I'll talk about that. However, one of the things I did this year was I ran the Power Rangers RPG for 4 sessions. And instead of putting all of my experiences running the RPG into the same video where I'm going to talk about everything else that happened over December, I wanted to make a video specifically to talking about that experience, my opinions of the Essence 20 system, specifically the Power Rangers RPG system, now that I've actually had a chance to run it, and more than just like a one shot or something. Like, I actually got to dig deep into it. I got to play around a little bit with some monster stat blocks to make them fit a little bit better for me personally. I got to create some of my own content. It was interesting. So that's what today is going to be. I'm just going to be talking about the Power Rangers RPG. So, first things first. If you watched my video yesterday, the I talked about session zeros and how they're not nearly as important as people make them out to be. It's not saying that they're not useful. They are just not the be all end all. I will say, for the Power Rangers RPG specifically, the session zero was really, really useful. More so than most other systems I've played. The session zero from this, like my normal way of starting up a campaign, and actually technically this campaign started kind of similarly to that, is I contact people individually. Sometimes it's just like, sometimes I do make kind of a blanket statement of, hey, I'm looking for players, and I'll kind of cast a net amongst people I know, and I mention, by the way, if you have friends that would be interested in playing in a game, have them contact me. So I may start with something very kind of open, but it always eventually turns into one-on-one conversations, generally through email, though I have been using Discord a little bit more often, just because organizing things in Discord is slightly easier, because everything is in one place. So, for the Power Rangers RPG specifically, I don't think I could have met with each person individually and had the same experience. And I think some of that, a little of it, not a ton, some of that is due to how specifically the Power Rangers RPG is written. And by that, what I mean by that is The roles in the Power Rangers RPG are actually designed so that you cannot have two characters that are using the same role. In literally every other class-based RPG, that's normally not a thing. I personally am not aware of another class-based RPG that says in the rules you can't have two characters that are using the same class or role or whatever you want to call it. But they do specifically state that in the Power Rangers RPG. Because of that, creating a team has to have a little bit of group interaction because you each have to decide upon what roles you want. And to be blunt, if I had done it individually, it would have gone significantly worse. Despite the fact that all four of my players were wonderful and amazing and would never have kind of devolved into infighting or anything like that over the role that they wanted. Just having everyone there and having them all be able to say, well, I really want to play, the speedster, or I really want to play the leader, was a really essential part of the process. Now, yes, that was one reason why the Session Zero was kind of essential for that. It was not the biggest reason. The biggest reason actually comes back to something I can't remember if it was Zach Eubank or Malika Lim, whom I may be getting their last names wrong now because they're married and I believe they went hyphenated with their last names. I actually can't remember. I just know them as Zach and Malika, and they're both wonderful, amazing, incredible people. They run Hyper RPG. They're great. But before Essence 20 was even a twinkle in somebody's eye, a few years ago now, wow, it's really weird that it's been so long. Hyper RPG worked with Saban, who owned Power Rangers at the time, and actually created an officially licensed Power Rangers RPG live play. And the system that they used was not Essence 20. Never mind. I feel a sneeze coming on. All right, so the system that they used is not Essence 20 in any way, shape, or form. Again, this predates Essence 20 by a few years. The system that they used is one that Malika herself designed. Malika, in addition to running a company, she's also a game designer. She created this system. There were talks about of eventually releasing the system. They never really came to fruition. But the system itself, to be blunt, the system itself was secondary to the show. A lot of the aspects of the system they didn't really use as the show went on, which makes perfect sense. The show was effectively a playtest for a brand new system, and as they played it more, they started realizing the things that worked and things that didn't. But either Zach or Malika mentioned when they were talking about kind of the genesis of the show is they did have a kind of not really tryout, but I would call it a chemistry game. It was something that we did with Realms of the Wild, which was basically before we had everyone actually build their real characters, we had them play a game of Open Legend, which is the system that we use for Realms of the Wild, the Zelda RPG I run. We actually had them play a session of Open Legend in Hyrule. It created a one-shot set in the Ocarina of Time era because everyone was really familiar with it, and I didn't want people to have to try and figure out where their character would fit. No, everyone in the cast had played Ocarina of Time like a billion times at that point. So, and so we did this thing, we called it a chemistry game, and it was basically to get them together to see how they played off each other, to see if there's going to be any kind of problems or any thing like that, as far as just, personality types or anything. We were already sold that these are the people we wanted, but we did want to give them a chance to play in the system, play with each other, and really get used to being able to play off of each other. And so for Power Rangers Hyperforce, which was the officially licensed Power Rangers live play that Hyper RPG did, they did kind of a chemistry game, basically, so they could teach them the rules of the game and they could get them started with the idea of what it's like to play Power Rangers on a tabletop. And one of the things that they weren't expecting was the fact that right from that first little chemistry game, everybody was acting like Power Rangers. Now, one of the players, Peter Sudarsu, was the blue Ninja Steel Power Ranger. He was an actual Power Ranger. So, to be blunt, it would not be particularly shocking to see Peter Sudarsu, despite the fact that he was playing a different character in the Power Rangers universe. It was not really a shock to me to hear that Peter Sudarsu kind of fell into just making decisions like he was a Power Ranger and acting like a Power Ranger. They didn't need to brief him. They didn't need to, tell him the motivation. He just kind of fell into it. But everybody else did. The cast itself was Christina V, Andre the Black Nerd, what's her name? Strawberry something. Now I feel really dumb. Strawberry 17, that's her name. She has an actual name. It's Megan, and I can't remember her last name because I'm really bad with names. But Strawberry 17, and then I can't remember his name either. But he played Bulk in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers and stayed with the character remarkably long. I actually came back for Power Rangers Samurai to play Bulk again. But anyway, so those are the 5 Rangers. 2 of them were directly connected to Power Rangers. One of them played the bully effectively, though to be perfectly honest, Bulk and Skull had one of the greatest character arcs of any of the characters on Power Rangers, because they started out as bullies and then got obsessed with the Power Rangers and then decided that they wanted to protect people too. And then by the end of In Space, there's a final scene in Space where the Alliances of Evil has taken over Earth. The Power Rangers themselves have been beaten and effectively defeated. They're basically preparing to be wiped out, and they're really, really worried, and they don't know what to do. And so Astronema gets up, and she goes, I want the Power Rangers, because apparently she still didn't know who they were or something. Where are the Power Rangers or something? So she's basically commanding all of these civilians, like, hand over the Power Rangers or I'll destroy your planet. And Bulk, out of nowhere, goes, I am, and I can't remember what color he decided to be. It might have been the yellow, or it might have been the Black Ranger. I can't remember. But he goes, I am a Power Ranger. And then Skull comes up and, I am a Power Ranger. And then Professor What's-His-Name, the weird dude that they were dealing with at that point, goes, yes, and I am a Power Ranger too. And the entire crowd had this kind of I am Spartacus moment, which, if you don't know what that is, there's a movie called Spartacus, and it's a classic in American cinema, and you need to go watch it. But it turns into this really great thing where the Power Rangers had always been protecting the civilians, and the civilians kind of step up to protect the Power Rangers. But not only that, the people that used to bully the Power Rangers, the bad guys of season 1 of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, are the ones that step up to defend them 4 seasons later, or 5 seasons later. Like, that is such a cool character. And then, after all that stuff is done, the real Power Rangers show up and they morph and they start fighting. And Bulk the bully, Bulk the coward, Bulk, all these horrible, like, negative aspects of his character, okay? He was comic relief, and he was meant to be the person that you didn't like and that you were happy when bad things happened to him. He turns to the civilians and goes, hey, they need our help, let's go. And he leads the charge to help the Power Rangers fight off this impossibly large army. And so I always really liked the fact that, Bulk kind of made good at the end of Power Rangers. So anyway, going back to Hyperforce, that was one of the things that they kept saying was that they just acted like Power Rangers. And just hearing that is really weird. But when I ran my Power Rangers game using a completely different system, but it was still Power Rangers, I didn't have to prep any of them. Like, one of the players had never watched Power Rangers before, was not a Power Rangers fan. He's just one of my players that enjoys playing different systems with me. So he'd never played Power Rangers before. And then we had people on the other side, like Dale. Dale is a hyper fan of Power Rangers. I'm not sure I would ever want to get into like a fandom off with Dale, because in my mind, I think I'm the bigger Power Rangers fan. I can't be sure about that with Dale. She's a huge Power Rangers fan and she knows a ton about it. And so we had the full spread of players. We had someone that knew nothing about Power Rangers before they started, and we had someone who was a super fan, and everyone in between. And yet, in the first session, I did tell them, by the way, I'm going to introduce each of your characters, and I'm going to effectively give you guys a chance to kind of prove that you're Power Rangers. So they were aware of that going in. However, the sheer number of times that they just kind of fell into and gladly did exactly what I would expect Power Rangers on TV to do was mind-boggling. Just by sitting down and declaring them Power Rangers, they became Power Rangers. And if anyone is not, like, if you didn't watch Power Rangers when you were a kid, you have no interest in the series. What I mean by that is Power Rangers in and of itself was, effectively a morality play with martial arts, some slapstick, and giant robots. The entire purpose of most of kids' programming during the 90s was to sell toys. We cannot get past that thing. Power Rangers was designed to sell toys. However, they also, partially due to regulations at the time, they also needed to have like a message for the kids. And so every episode would have some sort of message that the kids could learn from. So Power Rangers in and of themselves were designed to, were written to have flaws that would cause problems for them, and then they would learn from those flaws and become better people. And that's how literally every Power Rangers team has ever functioned. Is they make the mistakes so you don't have to. But overall, the thing that makes them Power Rangers is they are always willing to do what's right. And it's not like, a super Boy Scout kind of thing. I am for truth, justice, and the American way, which means totally different things than when that phrase first came out. They're not about just being mega Boy Scouts or just holier than thou people. They're real people that just happen to also understand that there is a right and a wrong in a lot of situations. And despite the fact that doing what's right is generally never going to be the easy option, they're going to default to doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do. Not because they have some sort of obligation to do it, not because they're paid to do it, or because they're afraid if they don't do it, then other people might see them as a role model. The whole thing about almost every single Power Rangers team is they are nobodies when they're not morphed. One of the kind of running gags in, I think, season 2 of the Power Rangers, when Bulk and Skull got really kind of hyper focused on learning the identity of the Power Rangers is every so often somebody would make reference of, well, what about these guys? You know, they are they're 16s that all happen to wear monochromatic outfits that just happen to associate with the major colors that the Power Rangers wear. Oh, and they're always hanging out together. And they're all martial artists. And so there was this kind of running joke where every so often it would get suggested, and Bulk and Skull would just look at him going, ha ha ha, right. And when they do finally realize, they actually learn it a couple different times. But the first time they learn it, their memories get wiped. And the first thing they do, they go, they're the Power Rangers? So the Power Rangers are not doing what you see a lot of celebrities doing now, which is this kind of activism, not because they actually believe what it is that they're saying, but because they've been put into a place where they feel that if they don't say this, that they're setting a bad example, and they don't want kids to do the wrong thing simply because the celebrities didn't tell them to do the right thing. That kind of performative morality was never a part of the Power Rangers. It was always about, no, we're going to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And we're not going to take credit for it, especially when we wear suits, because that's part of being a Power Ranger. Is you don't get to take credit for it. Your identity is always this is a secret, with a few rare exceptions. Like Lightspeed Rescue, everybody knew who they were because they were a government organization. SPD, same basic premise. Everybody knew who they were. But most Power Rangers series, they don't. So I think that was probably the coolest thing for me personally to witness, was just how powerful the idea of becoming a Power Ranger is, to the point where I didn't have to re-explain situations to them. I didn't have to go, well, remember, you're a Power Ranger, so you might want to do... No, never in the entire 4 episodes did I ever present them with a situation where they did anything that I wouldn't expect a Power Ranger to do. And it was just so amazing. Because again, the system itself, I wouldn't say anything in the system mechanically encourages you to play like a Power Ranger. It's an RPG system, and if you take away the Power Rangers aspects of it, which is not difficult to do, and you just leave the mechanics there, I mean, they did that with G.I. Joe and Transformers as well. Like, you can play Essence 20 without it being Power Rangers. There's nothing really built into the system that forces you to act like a Power Ranger. And yet, just being told that you're a Power Ranger, just by being able to say it's morphin' time, and morph, and being read the rules of being a Power Ranger and stuff like that, like, just that experience turned these people into Power Rangers. And that, to me, was the most amazing aspect of the entire experience. And that's not to say that the system itself isn't great. I really love the Essence 20 system. Again, I've said this multiple times, the Power Ranger RPG core book is not super well written. And that is not a dig at Renegade Studios or anyone that works there. I believe they also understand that the Power Rangers core book was not super well written, because they've changed things in subsequent books. Like the G.I. Joe and the Transformers changed how they talked about getting your skills from your role. Where in the Power Rangers it's really difficult to understand. In both G.I. Joe and Transformers, it's really simple. The stun mechanic was really difficult to understand in Power Rangers. It was super simple to understand in G.I. Joe and Transformers. So I definitely think they need to reprint the book and add the errata in and things like that. And I still strongly believe that they need to get rid of the color focus on the roles and adopt my system, to be blunt, which is what we used in the Power Rangers RPG. We did not tie their colors to their roles at all. And we had our Green Ranger was the White Ranger. Our Black Ranger role was actually our Blue Ranger. Our Yellow Ranger was using the... Oh, wait, no. The Black Ranger role was being used by the Yellow Ranger. And the Yellow Ranger role was being used by the Blue Ranger. And then the Red Ranger role was our Red Ranger, because it just made sense. Yeah, so... the system itself is absolutely fine. I'm going to talk about the mechanical stuff I learned in a second here, but the most impressive thing that I really think everyone should try is playing a Power Ranger turns you into a Power Ranger. It's the weirdest thing in the world. It's hard to explain, but it's 100% a thing. Again, I strongly believe other people that have played this system will agree with me. Like I said, even people that didn't play this particular system, the Hyperforce team said exactly the same thing. Playing a Power Ranger makes you a Power Ranger. And I think it just goes to show you just how special and magical Power Rangers is. It's one of the reasons why at 34, I am still a major fan of Power Rangers. And I stopped being a fan for a while, not because I didn't like it, but because I was told point blank, you are too old to like Power Rangers. That's for children. You're an adult. Or actually, you are a young adult, because I stopped when I was like 12 or 13, which is still really old for a Power Rangers fan. I'm well outside their target market. But I think it just goes to show you just how powerful the idea of being a Power Ranger is. I will say the characters are not sunset. The characters are not gone or anything like that. Everybody in the cast has said that they want to play again. It will just be a matter of finding times when schedules can meet up and that I actually have the ability to run a game. Because again, a lot of my issues with... Like one of you lovely people went, hey, I would really love to see you continue this series. I'm like, I would love to continue it, but I'm running 3 campaigns currently. And that alone is hard enough for me to deal with. And with my mental health and my disabilities and everything, like I already have to cancel games. Perfect example, today, Realms of the Wild did a one-shot, GM'd by Alex, who's amazing and wonderful. He plays Pierre in Realms of the Wild, but I was so overwhelmed with everything that happened over December that I couldn't run it. I couldn't run anything this weekend. And so Alex stepped up and he ran a Honey Heist adventure that I assume was wonderful. I was unconscious when it happened. I haven't had a chance to watch the VOD. But I watched their other Honey Heist, and it was amazing and wonderful because Alex is great. So yeah, like the idea of me being able to run this campaign in addition to the other ones I run is just not feasible. But all of us have agreed that we will definitely play this again. And there's also the fact that Dale is incredibly busy because she does amazing things all the time. She's done like so many really cool things. Like she has her own YouTube channel where she puts out really, really interesting content. A lot of it has become more D&D focused. It used to be mostly focused on mythology and things like that because that's what she did for Geek and Sundry. And now she's kind of shifted over towards D&D and RPGs because she is phenomenally gifted and skilled in RPGs in general. She created a supplement that's on the DM's Guild that I did an entire review process and a D&D deep dive process for, and I was incredibly impressed with just how amazing it was and just how much content was in it. So yeah, like she is really, really busy. Here's a little secret for you. There are a few people that whenever I start something new, I will always contact them and say, hey, by the way, RPG related specifically, I'll go, hey, by the way, I'm doing this thing. I wanted to, uh, I wanted to make an offer, see if you wanted to join us for this. Without giving too much away, Dale is one of those people that I generally will approach with most of the things that I do, despite the fact that she lives on the opposite side of the planet, and time zones are annoying and everything like that. I generally will approach her and say, hey, by the way, I'm doing this thing. If you're interested, we'd love to have you. There's a few other people that I won't mention, but because I finally got to work with Dale again, I'm mentioning her. And a lot of times she does so much that she can't. And there's nothing wrong with it. She's amazing. If you don't watch her stuff, her YouTube channel is Monarch's Factory, and it's some of the best content on the planet. Like, she's so good at what she does, significantly better than anything I put out. So yeah, all that stuff just means that I could not run a steady campaign. But when all of our schedules line up again, we will definitely be playing these characters again. We've already started talking about what their Zords will look like. So, yeah. So, moving on. I'm going to get a drink now because I still feel like shit. Also, apparently, if you swear within the first, I think it's like 8 to 15 seconds of a video now, YouTube instantly demonetizes the video. I found that humorous because something that I do that a lot of people may not realize I do this is I will intentionally add swears and things like that somewhere in the video, because a lot of the content I make could be misconstrued by a moron, which I don't want to disparage people that work at YouTube, but we have seen enough of their judgment calls that I think I can safely say that there are morons that work there. Because I talk about things like Power Rangers and board games and video games, it would not be outside the realm of reason of somebody saying, oh, this is made for kids, and doing things like turning off comments. Because if you make things for kids, you can't have comments. It kind of suppresses a lot of aspects about it unless you specifically have designed it to be for kids. So it's really bad. So I will add swears and things like that somewhere in the video just to ensure, no, this is not made for children. I'm not talking to children when I do this. So I just found that funny. Anyway, mechanics-wise, probably the thing that I had the most struggle with was story points. Mostly because story points in and of themselves are a fantastic idea. And I really love, because they feel kind of like a DM inspiration in D&D 5th edition. But DM inspiration is so limited, and because you can only have one at a time, and because the only thing that it gives you is advantage on a single roll, it feels extremely underwhelming to hand it out. With story points, because they're a shared pool, that means everyone is kind of encouraged to try and earn them in various ways. And whenever anyone wants to use them, there's always kind of a conversation at the table about who can use it best. And that's something that I like. Any game mechanic that encourages the players to strategize between each other is a good game mechanic, because it is extremely easy for games to put the focus, like D&D does this constantly, specifically in 5th edition. It's one of the things I'm less than thrilled about 5th edition. They put such a focus on making sure that each class felt unique and was balanced against the other classes, that they didn't really focus on things that would encourage the classes to work together. Everything was designed so that only the specific combinations that they wanted to allow would happen. And so because of that, especially combat in 5th edition, combat is very, very easy to be self-focused, where you really don't care what the rest of the players on the table are doing. You have your character, and they're going to do a specific thing, and it doesn't matter what the other characters do because it's barely going to change what you do. It's one of the reasons why I put such a big emphasis when I find a control-based class, because controllers, by definition, require you to work together with your group. And it's one of the things that I love about 4th edition was because none of the powers in 4th edition are generally feel broken. What becomes broken is when 2 or 3 different characters start working together and adding different things together. That was the saying that I learned way back when I was playing 4th edition was the most overpowered thing in 4th edition is teamwork. Because all of the classes were balanced just amongst themselves and balanced against other classes to make sure none of them felt more powerful than another one. But the interactions between classes were not balanced in any way, shape, or form. Because of that, it really encouraged you to work with your party, to be aware of everything that was going on at the table. And it was really, really fun. So story points, in my opinion, because it's a share pool, is one of those mechanics that allows for that encourages teamwork, which again really fits with the Power Rangers. However, none of my players used any story points in the first episode, and in between sessions, I had to tell them, by the way, you guys have story points. Use them. Use them as often as you can. And they just weren't, to the point where I gave an additional use for story points, which effectively is a reroll token. Which worked fine. Like, story points can already reroll nat ones, and I just lifted that limitation, said, yeah, if you want to burn a story point to reroll something, that was fine. And it worked well. Now, my players were rolling horribly, so I have no idea if it breaks the game. If you have players that can actually roll above a 10 on the D20, but for us, it worked really, really well. And it felt good to be able to hand out story points in the same way in Open Legend I hand out legend points. Because it's a simple way for me to be able to reward players. But because of that, it felt really, really, because the players weren't super familiar with it, it was really hard to get them to use it until the final episode, when they were just burning through them constantly, mostly for rerolls. Yeah, I think. See, one of the other issues with it is one of the things you can use a story point for is to let you roll as if you were specialized in the skill check, which means you roll all the dice, all your skill dice, instead of just the highest one. And whichever skill die rolls the highest, you get to keep that. Because at first and second level, you really generally are only rolling like a D4 or a D6 for most of your skills that you are trained in. Expertise doesn't change that much, especially for like if you only have a D4 in it. Expertise is really not that useful. Most of the other uses for the story points, the players just weren't using them. And the other thing that I thought was a little bit more interesting is that I never felt the need to use story points for any of my monsters or for any of the NPCs that I created, because they just really weren't doing a ton of rolling, the NPCs. And that might have just been because I didn't utilize them enough. But the storyteller, which is the GM in Essence 20, actually has their own pool of story points that gets replenished fairly often. So they're supposed to be using them pretty often. But like the monster I was using already had specialization in both of the attacks, or both of the attack types that they did. They had specialization in melee and they had specialization in targeting. So there's no reason to use it for that. I for whatever reason, I never rolled a nat 1 on any of them. And I really wasn't having a hard time doing the things that I wanted and creating challenging encounters for the players. Especially since the monster that I chose was a bit too high a threat level for them. But again, figuring out combat in balance and stuff like that is not in the Power Rangers RPG. They don't tell you how to balance encounters at all in there. So I basically just went through Adventures in Adrian Grove and the first. Thank you. And the intro adventure in the book, and kind of had to figure out, just looking at the encounters that they created there, and kind of had to reverse engineer it. And the monster that I chose was a little bit more powerful than what they should have been facing at that level, but what I tend to see in most pre-written campaigns, especially introductory ones, is combat encounters are easy. So I didn't feel horrible about putting something a little bit more powerful for them. After the first time they dealt with him and they couldn't actually hit him at all, I realized they need to lower a few of the stats and things like that to make it more viable that they might actually hit the creature. But other than that, it wasn't horrible. And I did do mostly like a solo encounter, as opposed to having a bunch of putties and the monster, which I considered, but this worked well. So, yeah. So story points and stuff like that, at least for the GM, I just didn't feel like I was using them anywhere near as much as I should. And it was mostly because it felt unfair for me to use them against the players, because they were already put in some pretty serious conditions, and then it was already kind of stacked against them. So the next time I play, I will probably change some things around so that it's not quite as intense for them. That being said, the other mechanic that I did not use anywhere near as much as I should was the shifting mechanic, which is basically by doing certain things, you could get higher dice or lower dice. And my default when players did cool things was to give them a story point instead of giving them dice shifts and things like that, or giving them edges and snags, which is the advantage-disadvantage system. I was a little more comfortable with the edge and snag because it's identical to the 5th edition advantage-disadvantage system, and I'm very comfortable with that. But if you are going to run any Essence to the 20 game, I really think you need to lean a lot heavier into the shifts than you do the story points, because I think the shifts themselves incentivize the players to use story points more, especially at low levels. Because again, one of the things that I think is most useful, one of your best bang for your buck uses of your story point, is giving you a specialization when you don't have one. And by shifting up their dice, because again, at first level, at most, you are generally going to have a D6 is your highest skill die. I don't think any of my players had a D8. You theoretically could if you kind of min-maxed your character, but none of my players did. And so it was getting specialization on a D4 roll really just means, oh, I can also flip a coin with this? Hooray! So by using the shift mechanic more often, and giving more shifts as well, instead of just, oh, I'll give you an upshift for that, you're giving them shift 2, shift 3, that highly incentivizes them to use their story points, and it's something for a single roll, whereas a story point can technically affect a lot more than just a single roll. So that was the other kind of big thing that I learned about the system itself, is that I really need to rely a lot more on the shifting system than edge and snag and the story points. Not that they're not great, but story points feel familiar because they're similar to legend points. And I'm very used to using legend points in another system, and Snag Edge is advantage, disadvantage. So those are two systems that I was very, very comfortable with. And so I leaned on them a lot more heavily than I did the system that I was not as comfortable with. And this is something that anytime you go from running a system that you're very familiar with to running a system that you've never run before or have limited experience with, this is something that I highly recommend to all dungeon masters, game masters, storytellers, whatever you want to call yourself. Lean into the new mechanics. Use them wrong. As I've mentioned before, failure is a fantastic teacher. Success is a horrible one. Use them wrong, abuse them, overuse them, and then learn from it. And I really didn't. And I kind of regret it because I think certain situations might have been a little bit more fun if I was letting them get more upshifts and things like that. So yeah. As far as the rest of the system itself, the system is really, really nice. It feels really, really good. And I think the thing I enjoyed the most was every ranger, anyone that's watched Power Rangers knows that Rangers get special power weapons. And they help kind of define the Ranger. And different series use them in different amounts. Like, if you look at Power Rangers Zeo, other than Tommy the Red Ranger using his sword a fair amount, most of the other power weapons are not used almost at all. And my favorite example of that is one of the power weapons in Zeo is a pair of tonfas. For people that don't know, a tonfa is, I believe it's Okinawan. Okinawan or Japanese. I can't remember exactly where it came from. But it's effectively, if you've ever seen like a police baton where it's got the thing and then it's got the thing hanging off it, that's a tonfa. And you're actually not supposed to use it by holding the short end like you would like a sword or something. The way you're supposed to use it is you hold the part that's perpendicular and it goes across your forearm. And part of using a tonfa is you actually swing it so that the long part will go from going across your forearm to being out, and you'd have the short part here. And that's generally how you use it, is you spin them, and when it's the long part here, they're more of a defensive weapon, so you can literally block attacks with it. And you also, when you punch, instead of the force of the punch being spread out over the entirety of your hand, the force of the punch is spread out over the small area of the end of the tonfa. And then when you spin it around, you can use it just like a baton, but it's instead of like a baton that, you know, you're going to be able to put a little bit of your some of your swing is going to come from your wrist. This, because it's effectively attached to your arm, gets rid of that, but it allows for some slightly different aspects. So the tonfa themselves, tonfas are super, super cool. They're a really, really interesting weapon. That takes a remarkably large amount of time to learn and master. I do not know too many people that were even aware that one of the Zeo Rangers had tonfas as their weapons. And it's either, and this is where I start messing up. I can't remember if it was Zeo or Turbo, but one of them had tonfas as their weapons. Because tonfas just don't really show up in the rest of the Power Rangers. Like, they generally just don't use tonfas. So different series have different emphases on weapons, but they all are an aspect of it. And the thing that I really enjoyed about the weapons that we created for Power Rangers was I got to design them myself, and creating new quote-unquote magic items, which is basically weapons that go through the upgrade system that's built into Essence 20, is remarkably easy. I created technically I created 3 of the 5 weapons. two of the other weapons, the Guandao that Dale's character Mackenzie used, that was just a reskin of a weapon. And then the power bow that Imp's character Jesse used was literally the power lance from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They had stats for it, and it was exactly what we were looking for, except we didn't want it to be a lance. We wanted it to be, he wanted a Screama sticks, which are just paired batons effectively. And I didn't think that translated super well on its own to a power weapon. It just didn't feel right for it. So I made it a staff that could split into a pair of Screama sticks to give them a little bit more benefit. And then when we were looking through, we just saw that the power lance did exactly that. And they specifically mentioned that splitting them into the two kind of hand lances that he could do literally said that they were like a Screama sticks. I'm like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel. But the power gauntlets, the power defender, and it was just the power gauntlet and power defender because we didn't have a fifth player. Those I created from scratch, and it was massively simple. And I didn't have to do much to them to make them feel special. Like the power gauntlets, the only special ability they had, other than the fact that you could punch with them, was using a free action. You could change their element. And that was it. Now, being able to change elements in Essence 20 is actually remarkably powerful. And one of the things I tried to hint to Scott, who played Jordan, the Red Ranger, or not Jordan, Dean, the Red Ranger. Sorry, he played the Red Ranger. Was one of the things you could do was Sonic. Sonic energy. You get an alternate attack. Every energy form gives you kind of an alternate attack or something. For Sonic, their alternate attack is you can target a different defense. It was like their will defense or something like that. I can't remember specifically. And for this particular monster, their toughness, their original toughness was 19, which is really, really high. And their evasion was 15, which is still relatively high. And none of the players were able to hit these defenses at all. And so I actually lowered the toughness down to 18 just to make it a little bit easier for them. But the willpower defense, or whatever it is that I can't remember, was 13. So in order to you target the alternate defense for Sonic, you did have to downshift it 1. But still, downshifting 1 to be able to hit a target number of 13 instead of 19 was massive. So yeah, being able to at will change the power of that might be a little bit broken. I don't know. It worked well. He decided to go electricity instead of Sonic, which just let him upshift his attack, which still worked perfectly fine. They were still having a hard time hitting them. And the stun mechanic kind of broke the fight, and so I have to relook how stun works, because I might have to start making, at least for quote-unquote boss monster style Inca counters, I might have to modify how stun works on them if I understand it right, because it really, really massively changed the encounter. So creating the weapons was really simple and was really fun, and they felt special. They didn't feel like they were getting, oh cool, I have a great axe now. It's the same great axe that everyone else. Everyone felt that their particular weapon was specifically designed for them. Even the ones that were reskinned, it still felt special. And I think that's one of the things that the Essence 20 system does better than any system I've seen on the market, aside from possibly the One Ring, which part of their level up process, instead of like gaining levels in it, you can kind of customize your weapons. Like you don't go, constantly getting new weapons and stuff like that. As you level up, you can add benefits to your weapons and basically turn them into the equivalent of magic items. I'm not saying that's better than this system. I'm saying it's similar in process, and they're both really good at that. If/when we play again, part of the Essence 20 system is them being able to basically customize their own weapons, and there are roles built in that if they go, you know what, I want to add this aspect to my weapon. Okay, well, we have to make these rolls, and depending on how you do with the rolls, it may succeed, it may fail, it may take longer, it may take less time, more time, all these other things, but they have that system built into it, and it's a really, really great system. One of the things that I tend to not really enjoy about D&D in general is just how pointless your weapons are. Not to say that weapons themselves aren't useful, or magic items and magic weapons aren't really, really cool, but you really don't form any sort of attachment to the weapon itself. You form an attachment to what it can do. But if you find something else that just has better stats, or a cooler thing that it allows you to do, you just throw it away. And I've never really enjoyed that. In my own D&D campaigns, once they've been going long enough, I will create custom magic items for the characters that grow as their character grows. And I work with the players to design them, because having something like that is tied to your character makes you that much more connected to your character. And when you're in combat, you feel that much more special, because you are doing something that literally no one else in the game can do because of this particular weapon that is yours personally. And I like the idea. I took a lot of ideas from like the Vestiges of Divergence from Critical Role, where they start in like an unawakened state, and then as you do things, they become more powerful. And my goal is always, at the end of the campaign, I keep these weapons and they become legendary items for the rest of my campaign, where you may, another group of players might be going through and they find one of the magic items, and that was used by one of the other things, but it's in its dormant state, and so that adds a little bit to the lore and makes it feel that much more special, that this item was forged by an adventurer using it to save the world. And that's kind of what I feel like with the weapon and equipment upgrade system in the Essence 20 system, is the fact that these weapons start feeling like they are legendary weapons that kind of grow and upgrade as you go. And something that I think would be really cool if someone was running multiple Power Rangers campaigns, where they can reference the old Ranger team, very similar to how they do in the actual Power Rangers series now. They'll go, oh my god, you're the Mighty Morphin Red Ranger, or oh my god, you're Time Force Blue. Is, the idea that eventually they might be able to find, the Power Sword from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and oh wow, this is the Power Sword, I can't believe this is what Jason used to defeat Goldar so many times, and he used it against the King Sphinx and broke his staff with it. And I like that idea of these items lasting beyond the Power Rangers, because they're so iconic. So yeah, really, really lean heavily into the equipment upgrade system in all the Essence 20 things. Like we saw when I made the Transformers character. Building, part of the fun of building it was simply creating the weapons that we were going to use for it, and figuring out which integrated weapons you were going to have. For that particular character, I think... Oh, no, I did have 2 integrated weapons. Yeah, I really liked just how intricate that system is, and I think it's something that needs to exist in more RPGs. Like one of the things that a lot of people will complain about 5th edition specifically is that their magic item creation system, like if instead of finding a magic sword, one of the players wanted to make one, there really aren't rules for creating magic items in D&D 5th edition. And part of that is because there aren't really rules about what makes a magic item. There aren't. if you look at something like the difference between a Wand of the War Mage and a Staff of Striking. Staff of Striking effectively lets you multi-class into a monk, because it allows you to stun. It allows you to do a lot of really cool things. And I have seen an impressive number of wizards take a Staff of Striking, because I believe the Staff of Striking was designed for a monk, but it replicates a lot of the abilities the monk already has. So it's kind of, it gives them extra uses of Stunning Strike and a few other really useful things. But if you give that to something like a wizard, you have effectively multi-classed the wizard into a monk, because now they can Stunning Strike without them ever having to do that. Where compared to like Wand of the War Mage, you add 1 to your spell attack rolls and your spell save DC. That's it. And then we go to something like a Flame Tongue, where you speak a magic word and it does extra fire damage every hit, versus a Frostbrand, where it glows when you're in cold areas, and does a little bit extra frost damage. Like, the disparity between different weapons and what they can do is massive. And there really are no hard and fast rules to what is okay for a magic weapon to be able to do or not be able to do. Even with the common, uncommon, rare, legendary classification system, it's just not super well defined, and it never has been in D&D. So creating a system that can't be exploited by players to make their own magic items, it's far too easy to break D&D just in general, every edition of D&D, letting players make their own magic items, unless you only give them really boring options and you leave all the cool stuff to actual magic items that they find, which kind of defeats the purpose. So yeah, the weapon upgrade system in Essence 20 is really, really cool. I would love to see them expand upon it and give more upgrade options. Not that they don't have tons of them, but the more options you can give for interesting things, I think personally, the better. Especially since there are already kind of pre-built limits as far as how many different things you can put onto an item. I don't think there's an actual kind of limit of upgrading the same item repeatedly, but every time you upgrade it, it becomes more and more difficult to do it, and requires more resources and things like that. So there is a system built in. It's still a lot up to the discretion of the DM, but it's a great system. I'm trying to think of anything else I learned. Running combat, as much as the Essence 20 system does not in any way, shape, or form require maps and minis, because of some of the mechanics in Power Rangers specifically. I'm specifically thinking of I think it's a loner roll is what I call it, but the I can look. I have the document literally right in front of me, because I left it on my desktop because I wasn't done with it. Come on. I just want to see what I called it. The Outsider. There we go. So the Outsider roll. They require you to effectively be the only person next to the creature in order to be able to get your solo strike. So because of that, as much as it doesn't require a map and minis, and you 100% can play Theater of the Mind, and that's what we did the entire thing, I think for the Power Rangers system specifically, I think maps and minis make a better experience. I think the players would have had a little bit more fun and would have been able to be a little bit more tactical if I'd given them minis and maps than doing the Theater of the Mind that we did. Now, part of that was just me being unfamiliar with the system, so I wasn't really able to set it up as well as I would have liked. Generally, I like to set the scene a little bit better so that the players can go, hey, you mentioned this thing. Can I use this to do this? Which is we'll talk about that in a second. The Essence 20 system is built for bargaining, which I love. But yeah, I think if when we play again, I will probably build maps, because we're already playing on Roll20, and so there it's not that difficult to put maps and minis into it. It's just, for me personally, I'm not good at making maps, and I generally don't enjoy making them. Even though I use Inkarnate now, which is significantly easier to use than any other map system I've used, it's still not something that I enjoy. But I think for this system in particular, maps and minis make sense. They work really well for Power Rangers, and it helps. Not just that, but like, again, because Power Rangers is built on these really cool fight scenes, and especially if you look at early Power Rangers, first 3 seasons, Mighty Morphin, Zeo, Turbo, Space started going away from it a little bit, but those first like 4 or 5 seasons, the environment was used constantly in fights. And I think one of my favorite examples is actually in Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie. That's not canon with the rest of this series. But the construction fight scene, they use the environment so much. Everything is useful to them. Like, one of my favorite scenes is they all split up in order to kind of split up the enemies so they're not swarmed by them. And so each person goes to a different part of this construction site, and Adam runs over to an earth mover. And Adam is doing all these like he is the Black Ranger role in the Power Rangers RPG. He is the epitome of it, because he is constantly making all these quips and jabs. He's doing that, and like, so as he's being chased by one of these ooze monsters, he runs past, and he runs up on the treads of this thing and runs past the cabin of it. And as he's going, he's got this purple dude right up behind him, and he just goes, "Let me get the door," and he opens the door and slams it into the guy. And then like he jumps off of that, and he does this real cool backflip and does like a backhand, and then does a sweep, and like, it's a really cool fight scene. But if you watch Power Rangers at all, again, especially the first 3 seasons, they are constantly using every part of the environment. Like I recently saw a clip of Billy in, I think it was season 2, because he wasn't wearing the muscle shirt. He was wearing a tank top underneath his blue lumberjack shirt is what I call it. But you could see that he did have a blue tank top underneath it. But this is before they started letting him show off that, holy shit, Billy is ripped. Which 100%, like, from the first episode, David Yost is a male gymnast. Male gymnasts are freaking ripped. So anyway, but the fight scene that he has against a bunch of Z-Putties is he's constantly jumping on and off of a picnic table and using that as a way to get him into better positions and stuff like that. So the environment itself in Power Rangers specifically has always been a major part of fight scenes, right from the beginning. Things like Kimberly, every so often, because, again, Amy Jo Johnson and Kimberly the character were both gymnasts. And so every so often you would see a bar that was just in any playground, because they'd fight on playgrounds. There'd be a bar there, and you would watch her just do gymnastics moves and then throw a kick at the end. Because she could, and it looked fancy. It had no practical value. So yeah, I think because of that, Power Rangers itself lends really heavily into using maps and minis. And the system itself does say, yes, you can use maps and minis. It's just, it doesn't require it in any way, shape, or form. Which is how it should be. But I think to get the most fun out of it, I really think you need to use maps, at least partially. And all of the adventures have maps in them that you can use. So it's not like they don't give you the ability to use them. They just don't. They don't emphasize it, I guess I should just say, which again isn't a bad thing. So finally, the other big thing that I learned, that I think my players were slowly starting to get ahead of, but I think a lot of them were worried about kind of rules lawyering or, not wanting to be quote unquote that guy. Essence 20 in general is built for bargaining. And what I mean by that is something that I do in every D&D game I play, and I will tell my any DMs I play for up front. I just want to let you know, I like to bargain. I will ask if I can have advantage on things fairly often for certain, I will describe why I think I should get advantage, and you are 100% in your right to deny every single time. Never give me advantage ever. That's perfectly fine. I'm not going to be upset about that. However, my D20s that I use have this really weird problem where they don't actually have numbers above a 7. So if I don't get advantage, I'm generally not going to hit. I roll really, really bad. And I do, I'll show you guys the D20s that I've been using for a while now. I bought these specifically. I think I bought these when we moved. By calling my dragon dice, you can guess why. Sure, I have the Nat 1 showing. But as you can see, it's a green. This is a metal die actually, and it's green. And it's got gold on it, so it looks like the Green Ranger. So yes, they do have double-digit numbers, but I just rolled really poorly, and so I am constantly going, hey, because I did this and this, can I have advantage? Or because I did this, and this, can we say, this is a prize? Or I will constantly, one of the games I was playing, and I'm playing effectively my Gambit character. It's a Battlemaster fighter that took the throwing weapons fighting style and uses darts that I've reskinned as playing cards. And so he attacks by throwing playing cards. There was a situation where we were in this abandoned mansion, and we went into this room, and there was a ghost of a woman in there who apparently didn't realize she was dead. And so we had a little bit of a conversation, got some plot points, and as we were leaving, one of the players decided that there was this really, really fancy, expensive looking object in the room, and she was dead. She didn't need it anymore, so they tried to steal it. The DM had them roll a stealth check or a sleight of hand, something to make it so it wasn't just blatantly obvious that, hey, I'm stealing your shit. And they failed miserably. And so the ghost went from ghost to banshee. And we didn't want to have to fight a banshee specifically because they are rough to fight. And we weren't sure what else was in the house that we were going to have to deal with. So everyone's trying to do things that go, hey, Almighty Dungeon Master, which I 100% say this when I do something weird, is I go, pardon me, Almighty Dungeon Master, just to let them know I'm going to say something weird right now. I need you to be prepared. And so my buddy that's running this goes, yeah, what's up? I want to try something weird. What do you want to do? Okay. I have a maneuver that allows me on a hit to make them roll a saving throw, and if they fail, they're frightened of me. What I would like to do in this situation is I would like to throw a card. If it hits, I want to make them make a saving throw to be frightened of me so that I can go in there and intimidate them away from this situation. Because I don't want to fight them, and I don't want to make them flee. I want to get an advantage in dealing with them. And he goes, it's interesting. I'll allow it. And so I did. I threw my card. It hit. They failed their save, and I came in. And I effectively argued, because when we came in, she was the ghost was an aristocrat, and asked what we were doing there, and we kind of just lied. It's like, oh, we're the help. We're the new cleaning staff. And so what I did was, when she went all banshee and was getting ready to kill one of my allies, I just went in and went, excuse me, madam, no, you do not talk to my employees like that. If you have a problem with our service, you will talk to me, and I will take the appropriate actions. And I am going to remind you right now that this is the third cleaning crew you have had in as many weeks. I cannot guarantee we will be able to provide you another one if I am forced to remove these members. You have made this very difficult, so If you have a problem with what is happening, talk to me. I will make the correction for my crew. By the way, we are the cleaning crew. This item that you claim she was trying to steal was covered in dust. She was literally doing her job, and you just screamed at her for it. I will not tolerate this behavior against my employees. And if you continue to do this, you will have to find a new company to provide you with your cleaning staff. And it was a bold-faced lie, and I'm trained in deception, and I had a decent charisma, and it worked. And so I diffused the situation by effectively Karen slapping her down. So I do bargaining all the time. The Power Rangers RPG and Essence 20 system in general is built around the idea that the players should be bargaining constantly. The upshift downshift system is built around the idea of bargaining. It really, really is. Players should be going, you know what? I have the high ground here. Can I get an upshift for that? Or, you know what? I did this. What I want to do is I want to kind of run towards them, slide between their legs, and then attack them from behind. I have more than enough movement to run around them. I just think that would be cooler. Can I have an upshift for that? Yeah, but make this particular check first, and if you do, it'll be this, and if you don't, it'll be this. So the system itself is built around. It is built to really, really reward good bargaining, and gives the DM enough different ways to reward the players that if players ever start attempting to abuse the bargaining system, where they're going, you know what, the sky is blue today, I should get an upshift for that because these bad guys don't like the color blue. You can go, well, actually this particular one loves blue, so we're going to give you a snag on that, or we're going to give you a downshift 2 on that because blue revitalizes him and therefore he's better at defending against creatures when the sky is blue. So yes, if you are going to be playing or GMing, encourage bargaining. It makes the game that much more fun. Again, more bargaining probably would have given them a better uses of their story points instead of just using them for rerolls. And it's a really, really good way. And again, I think a lot of players and DMs both get really, really worried about the idea of having an adversarial relationship with their players, which I 100% understand. I have played with adversarial DMs. I've had fun playing with adversarial DMs. I'm not saying that you can't have fun. However, it has to be a mutually agreed upon system. I have played with adversarial DMs that didn't have that agreement, and I had a really, really bad time, to the point where one time we had a DM in the Adventures League that was actually breaking Adventures League rules to screw over the party, and got us close to having a couple players lose their characters because they were changing monsters and giving monsters random abilities that they didn't have just so that the DM would feel more powerful. In the Adventurers League, killing a character is a big deal because if your character dies and you don't have enough money to resurrect them, or you get a complete TPK, that character is gone. All of the time that you've played them, all the magic items, all the experience that you've put into them, it just goes away. And you have to create a brand new character to play again. And the specific adventure we were playing was a tier 3 adventure. So everyone was playing characters they had been playing for years at that point. And the DM was just constantly changing. Like, he gave Vampire Spawns Magic Darkside, which basically... there's a spell called the Darkness Spell. Unless you have either True Sight or the ability to see in magical darkness, which is extremely rare, if the darkness spell is cast, you just can't see. Even if you have dark vision doesn't let you see in magical darkness. So it's actually a remarkably useful spell in certain situations. And I was playing my Shadow Monk character. One of the things they can do is they can cast darkness using ki. So I did that specifically because we were in a really bad situation. We had vampire spawn crawling across the ceiling, and it was in complete darkness. We were having a hard time hitting any of them. And so I went, you know what? We're already at disadvantage hitting these guys due to a bunch of other things. So there's no real benefit to us being able to see them right now. So I cast the darkness spell, thinking at least now they're going to have disadvantage on targeting us, and we can't provoke opportunity attacks because opportunity attacks are only provoked if you see them. So I cast the darkness spell, and I run to the edge of the hallway that my character already knows is there. And I take 3 opportunity attacks and almost go down. And I turn to the DM and I go, what the hell are you doing? He's like, oh, well, I said, I cast darkness. Dark vision doesn't work in magical darkness. And he goes, oh, well, they actually have the ability to see in magical darkness. I'm like, no, they don't. I know the monster stat block. And this generally tends to be kind of a dick move to call out your DM by saying, no, I know the stat block. Because I didn't need to look it up. Like, I didn't pull out the monster manual and go, where does it say that in here? I actually had the stat block memorized because it's a stat block I've used before. And I said, no, they don't. I know the stat block. And Adventures League rules specifically state you are not allowed to modify monsters. You can replace them with certain other monsters that are thematically fit, which was a new rule at that point. But you're not allowed to magically modify monsters other than changing prepared spells. You were allowed to change prepared spells on certain creatures, but you couldn't just give them new abilities. It's like, well, no, I decided this. Just don't worry about it, and it pissed me off royally. Like I was incredibly upset over it, and it made me hate that entire game. And I actually, because at that point my agoraphobia was starting to be. Technically, I didn't have quote-unquote agoraphobia yet because I wasn't... Well, I did because I was avoiding going outside and things like that. But it hadn't made me completely housebound. But my PTSD and my panic disorder and social anxiety disorder was getting significantly worse. I think that was either the second to last or the last convention I ever attended. And I started to have a full-blown panic attack. And I started to hyperventilate, and I started to basically freak out at the table. And the interesting thing about me personally is because I've dealt with panic attacks for most of my life, and I have specifically been punished for quote unquote freaking out and things like that. Like I've been chastised by multiple people, not just like family or something like that. No, I've had teachers call me out on it and stuff like that. So I learned to hide my panic attacks really well. If you don't know me, you will have no idea that I'm having a panic attack. I can actually hide my breathing patterns well enough that even when I'm starting to hyperventilate, you generally are not going to realize it until I start becoming out of breath. And then it's very obvious because I'm breathing, through my mouth. But up until that point, you would not be able to tell that I was having a panic attack. I just look like I'm getting really mad about something, which is not something that people tend to, like, I don't get mad very often. Even the, rants I've done on here, it's not really me being mad. The few people that have actually seen me mad have seen it. It is not an enjoyable experience for anyone, and I've had a couple people that have told me when I get actually mad, I am terrifying because I have a cold anger, and I become very cold. I start becoming much more quiet, and I become hyper logical, and I rip people apart. Not really physically. I tend to not that I haven't struck people in anger, but I tend to be extremely logical, and I will just absolutely eviscerate people logically and kind of verbally when I get truly, truly angry, when I lose control of my temper. So anyway, I get the idea of not wanting that adversarial relationship, but I don't consider bargaining, especially when the system itself encourages it to be that kind of adversarial. Oh, I'm going to try and get one up on the DM. Oh, the DM's going to one up on me. I don't. I think, at least as far as the Essence to the 20 system is concerned, I think the kind of bargaining aspect of it really is kind of a sparring almost. If you've never done if you've never practiced martial arts, you may not quite understand exactly what sparring is. A lot of people, when they hear the word sparring, and they know what I'm referring to, if you've never heard the word sparring before, sparring is effectively kind of less than full contact combat practice, effectively. Sparring, you throw punches and kicks at each other, and you, depending on the system that you're using, you might be trying to score points. Like in competitive sparring and things like that, combat sports, there's a point system, but it's not like a boxing match where you're actually trying to hurt the other person, not to like maim them or anything, but you're trying to knock them out and you're trying to do damage and things like that. Sparring is a step below that, and a lot of people, especially if the only sparring that you're familiar with is like competitive sparring, a lot of people think that the relationship between the sparring partners is adversarial, that each one is trying to beat the other one. And while in competitions, yes, that's true, I never did competitive sparring. All the sparring that I did was in martial arts classes, and in that particular instance, you're not competing against the other person. This is a different way to learn. And the entire purpose of sparring is to give you experience and train muscle memory in a way that you can't using drills and katas or forms, things like that. That's what sparring is. And it's a very friendly thing. I remember, I can see in my mind, I was really young. I was in, I think, 5th or 6th grade when I took Taekwondo. And I sparred, and I was up against an adult. He was in his 20s, younger than I am now, but he was not only was he in his 20s, but I think at this point I was a yellow belt, because if I remember correctly, white belts didn't spar, but I was yellow belt, which is basically at that point it was rank 3, because they changed their belt system. It went white, high white, gold. It wasn't yellow, it was gold, high gold. Oh. And then did it go? I can't remember if green was next or not, because then it went green, brown, red, black, I think is what it was. It's been so long since they changed the belt ranking system a while back while I was doing it, and it really confused me. Anyway, so the person I was up against was, I think, either a green or a red belt. So they were relatively high. They weren't black belt, but they were many levels above me. And I can still, in my mind's eye, see him standing across from me, full sparring gear, mouthpiece in hand, and he's just smiling at me. Not in that kind of, oh yeah, you're going to get it. But just, he was genuinely happy to be sparring with me. And I was generally happy to be sparring with him. I think his name might have been Jamie. I can't remember. But I can see his face so clearly, like it happened yesterday. It was just this he's like, okay, come on. And we got into it, and it was not a fair fight in any way, shape, or form. If we were doing point sparring, there was no way it was ever going to anywhere near. And I was kind of short at that point. Again, I was in the 5th grade. This guy in his 20s. He was like 6 foot easily. And we just had a blast. We had a lot of fun. And then my other sparring story, I was sparring against our instructor. I don't even know, to be very honest, I don't even know if he's still alive. He was not that old, but I believe he was a 3rd Dan black belt. His name is Doug Shears. Mr. Shears, if you exist out there anywhere again, understand that you 100% changed my life and turned me into the person I am today. So congratulations on that. But I was sparring against Mr. Shears, and again, he's a 3rd Dan black belt. He's a black belt that got 3 extra levels. Incredibly talented, incredibly skilled Taekwondo master. And again, the point of sparring is not to beat the other person; it's to give them a way to learn learn abilities and train muscle memory that they can't any other way. And so we're sparring, and basically what we were doing is we were just doing slight combinations back and forth. Like he would do some of his black belt combinations because I believe he had a test coming up to get his next dan. So he would do some really cool stuff. Like he'd throw an axe kick in there. He'd throw like something kind of cool and then some hand techniques just so he could get used to it. And then he'd let me come and I'd do some stuff. Well, still my favorite kick was called I think it was called a jumping front snap kick or a flying front snap kick. I can remember what it was called. But a front snap kick is a standard kick in most martial arts. Sometimes it's called a piston kick. There's a lot of other names for it, but it's basically you bring your leg up in front of you and then you extend it forward, and you hit with the ball of your foot. And while yes, it can do a significant amount of damage. I've done board breaking using that particular kick many times. It's a really effective kick. It generally doesn't do a ton of damage. It's mostly used to create distance between an opponent and you, because bringing your leg up and pushing it forward is really easy to do even if your opponent is about this close to you. So it's a really common kick. The flying version of it actually has a feint built into it. If you're not sure what a feint is effectively pretending to throw an attack and then stopping to provoke your opponent to guard or react to that, which could open them up for something else. Feints take a long time to learn how to use effectively, and they're much more psychological than they are like physical techniques that you train. You have to really read your opponent and get them to believe that you're actually throwing the punch for them to work. So the thing with the flying front snap kick or the jump front snap kick, I can never remember what it's called, is you jump up, but you jump on the leg that you're actually going to kick with. And the way that you get the height for it is you thrust the opposite leg up to build momentum to bring you higher. And because of that, it looks like you are just kind of jumping into the air and throwing a kick. And so that's what they expect. And they expect it from your other leg. And so when you get to almost to the peak of the jump, you push that leg down to give you some leverage, and you throw the kick with the other leg. And when it's done well, it is devastating because you have all the upward momentum getting put into the kick itself. Then you also have the torque of you literally kind of pistoning your body, and it goes into this one kick. And so this was one of my favorite kicks at the time. It's still one of the ones that I really love doing. It looks remarkably impressive for just how simple a kick it is. And so I see an opening, and he's just, again, it's really casually. We're not doing anything. And so I put this kick up, and he gets ready to block because he's not expecting the full flying aspect of it. And I do the piston, and I add the torque, and I do this, and the kick stops right here because this was no contact sparring at that point, or light contact. We could touch each other effectively, but we weren't allowed to put any force behind it. And so it stopped right here. And I landed, I slammed my foot on the ground. It makes this cool slapping sound, despite the fact it was carpet, it made this cool slapping sound. And I saw my instructor just kind of blink and go, "What?" Because he was completely unaware. And if we had been actually sparring, that would have been a knockout. Like the amount of power that you get behind that kick, and where, like I would have placed it right between his eyes. Like it wouldn't have broken his nose. It was high enough that he was only going to hit his forehead, but the amount of force in the kick would have knocked his head back, and bare minimum, he would have gotten a concussion from it, even with sparring gear. Just the amount of force behind it, that would have been either concussion or it would have been a knockout. Like it's a really strong kick. And so he just kind of blinked. He looked at me and just smiled and kind of laughed, and then chased me across, because when you're sparring, you spar in a line normally. Or at least we did here. I think, depending on the martial art, you might be allowed to circle around, but we kind of did fencing style sparring. So we were just on a line. And he just did punch and kick combos and chased me into the wall doing them. And we thought it was great, and he congratulated me. He's like, "That was a really great kick. You did that really well. Your execution was perfect." That was really, really well done, which is why I had to take you out. And it was a really great experience. So, going back to this game, the way that I see the bargaining system, that at least that's what I call it, in a game like this is the DM and the player sparring. They are genuinely competing against each other, but the point of the competition is to kind of learn and have fun, not so much to see which one wins, but to just try and, try things you haven't done before. Train techniques that you've never been able to use and train them in a way that you can't in other situations. It's the same thing I see with his bargaining in this. And because of that, it's not an adversarial thing. You're not trying to beat the other person. You're literally just trying to present a challenge for what they're doing, and they're trying to challenge you. And that's a really, really nice form of collaborative competition, I guess would be a good term for it. So, yeah. Anyway, I've been talking for an hour and a half about this. Overall, I had an absolute blast playing the Power Rangers RPG. I 100% recommend everyone should try the Essence 20 system in general. I personally think everyone should try the Power Rangers RPG because, like I said, simply by playing it, you become a Power Ranger. And the world desperately needs Power Rangers right now. We really, really do. People that do the right thing, not because other people are watching, not because I am justice incarnate, but because it's the right thing to do. People that will actively go and protect other people that can't protect themselves, whether that's physically, whether that's emotionally, whether that's psychologically, whatever it is. We need Power Rangers right now, and I think this is a great way to make new Power Rangers. So yeah. Otherwise, that is all for me today. That is all for me this month. Thank you to everyone that joined me on this incredible adventure. Like I said, this is my 10th year doing this. I've learned something new every year. Again, sometime next week I'm thinking I will talk about what I learned from the rest of Daily December. This has been wonderful and horrible and amazing and terrifying and every other emotion you can think of. It has been life-changing. And everyone that showed up for one video or all of them, any in between, I sincerely appreciate it. I also want to give out a special shout out, Kiri Callaghan, one of my friends and someone that impresses me and intimidates me and simply blows my mind with the just awesomeness that she encapsulates. She did Daily December this year as well. I just saw her last vlog. She did it a hell of a lot better than me. Like, she edited and she had intros and outros, and everything about hers is like a million times better than anything that I did. But it's her first year doing this in a long time. She made it to the end. So many of the things that she posted were phenomenal, amazing. So, Kiri, if you see this, congratulations. I don't know if you care about my personal feelings about this, but I'm incredibly proud that you were able to do such amazing things while also writing and finishing a novel. By the way, she's also finishing a novel right now, which will be her third novel. So, yeah. You compare to what I did to compare to what Kiri did. So anyway, that's going to be all for me today. I will see you guys next week sometime. All right? Bye-bye.